record button, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle Hanlon. And there you go, Kyle.
Good afternoon. Thank you everybody for taking the time out of your day for this. I know that everybody is in crisis mode right now, but then again, that's why we're here, right? There is a massive global crisis going on right now. We are going through this almost panic mode, and we are almost every action we're taking is a reaction. And we're trying to be proactive without having a sure footing on anything. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what are just, if we could just do five things to just get ahead of that curve and be proactive instead of reactive, what would that look like? I myself have spent decades in supply chain management and pretty much covered really every area of supply chain management, whether that's transportation, whether that's demand chain, whether that's forecasting, supply chain, logistics, whether that's inventory management, whether that's capacity planning, whether that's sourcing, procurement, buying, whatever. I've really kind of done a lot of it. I mean, literally, I've even gone to multiple different countries and set up their supply chains to make sure that they are set and sound in case of crisis such as this. This can be, if you take a few steps that we're going to talk about today, you can get ahead of the game instead of just being reactive towards it. So part of this today, again, I'm Kyle Hanlon. Thank you, Ed, for the introduction. We're going to talk about what does effective supply chain management look like during that global pandemic, not just what is normal operations, because this is not normal times. This is coming out of Pennsylvania, New Jersey area. And we've even been told that as of right now, we don't know when the state of Pennsylvania is going to get out of the lockdown. We don't know when a lot of the supply chains are going to resume normal operations. So how do we get ahead of that? So 5 things that you can do as soon as you get done with this session. 1, prioritize and allocate your resources. You probably have already done some of the stuff on this list, right? Identify what resources your organization already have. I will say that this tends to be a huge one. We tend to overlook this number one thing. We tend to overlook what resources do we already have at our disposal. We start running through what do we have to do, what can we do, without actually first taking a breath. Okay, what is here? What is there? What do we actually have? What do our customers need? Who are our top customers? And what level of inventory what do they have? And how do we start identifying where that inventory is going to be needed at when? 2, value stream map. This is different from the value chain. A lot of people conflate the two, especially since it's on the same slide, right? But the value stream map, as opposed to the value chain, which is the combination of supply and demand, the value stream is the overall process, the overall beyond the scope of your organization, from raw materials to delivery to the customer. Identifying and start mapping out the entire value chain can be very helpful to you and your organization. It's amazing when you actually diagram out the entire value stream, how much aha moments you can populate. Contact your suppliers. This is not just reach out to your suppliers and start dialogues to reserve stock, but this is also identifying what sort of alternative resources might you have. So for one quick example, and I want to apologize right off the bat. Anybody who's had me as an instructor knows I can go on tangents, but in the interest of time, I will make sure that I keep that limited. I was doing some consulting work a while back with a medical supply distributor, and right off the bat, they with Corona, they were trying to find masks. And one of the alternatives they were looking for is because 3M was running out of N95 masks. Well, a alternative to that standard supplier was Home Depot and Lowe's, which is something that is not a typical supplier for a medical distributor, but a home contractor supplier does have those masks, and it was another source that they were able to go to. So it's contacting those, identifying what the resources that they need, because as you're identifying and prioritizing the resources, they are as well. Identifying your inventory costs and restock fees. This is really, really crucial. Understanding, we tend to get into this panic mode of buy. We're going to access, we're going to get all this inventory. Then we don't know how much we're going to have. Some of you may have seen the mass amount of hoarding buying that people are buying almost out of this panic. And then this one person bought a whole slew of this, paper towels, and now Amazon refuses to take it back, and now he's complaining that Amazon will buy back all of this paper towels. Well, yeah, you bought all this, and now he doesn't have anywhere to really store it. This is a very common practice in whether it's pandemics, whether it's a crisis. Also, restock fees for those suppliers that will take stuff back. They do tend to charge. A lot of places, it's a standard fee is 30%. Contact your customers. Just as you're contacting your suppliers, contacting your customers, because you as their supplier, they're in crisis mode. You need to be able to identify what do they need and how can you get ahead of that demand curve. Because if you want to keep those customers after the crisis, people remember who they are able to turn to in a crisis. Prioritize and allocate resources. We normally, during normal operations, we normally, locate, place resources where the assets are. We identify what the inventory is on hand. Where's the due in quantity? Okay, well, what's the shelf life? For supply chain managers, this is second nature, right? This is something we always tend to do. But we're not in normal operations. We're in a crisis operations. We tend not to do things, or we shouldn't be doing things the same way harder. We shouldn't be doing things reactionary. We should be doing things in a proactive manner. Project demand forecasts on the daily operations. One of the main reasons why this is first and foremost is because things are changing on a daily basis. Every day that things are going on, things are getting harder. Things are changing on a daily basis, on a global scale. So the demand is changing on a daily basis. So you should really be looking at your demand forecast daily. Identify current inventory on hand. Just like the demand forecast is changing daily, your current inventory is probably changing daily. Of course, this is really going to depend on your industry. You know, something along the lines of food with perishable goods versus aviation. Aviation, you're probably not going to be using daily. Have a daily rotation rate for helicopter rotor blades versus bread in a grocery store. Do not assume due in quantity will arrive as expected because of how our supply chains are. To say that they're having a disruption is a massive understatement. The normal 3 to 5 day window for arrival date is not happening anymore. There is now a 2 to 3 week window for a lot of industries. I would suggest do not use the normal email process of contact your suppliers to find out when your shipment will arrive. Call them, be in constant contact. Prioritize your customer based on strategic alliances. This is crucial. It's not just about who is going to buy the most in the moment. It's about who is going to be a better partner in the long run. This is really where the prioritization of resources comes into play, not just we can get a $3 million deal right here, right now. It's about who is going to be your partner in the long run, because again, people are going to remember in the long run. And that's what's going to keep your business sustaining well past the crisis. Review trade routes for safety, efficiency, and effectiveness. This is crucial. I don't know why people tend not to do this. When we're talking about transportation, people tend to forget about where the transfer of ownership lies. They tend to forget about where the actual shipment is going through. There's a lot of ports that are shutting down. There's a lot of transportation to and from that is not a given that it will go from this location to this location anymore. There's a lot of places that it's not, for quarantine's sake, it's not safe to transport from there to there. Consolidate resources where they will be needed most. Again, another thing that sounds like a given, but you need to identify where they will be needed most. And that does take strategic planning. Value stream mapping. And again, this is identifying everything throughout the entire value stream and mapping it along the way. You want to identify the sponsor and set expectations, identify the members of the team, consider the customer, collect the data and produce a current state map, draw the customer near the top right of the value stream map, capture the process steps, add the process line, and identify improvement opportunities. The reason why I just went through that is because it makes a lot more sense if you see this. You noted, and I say that for a value stream, it's the entire process. You notice how this is not a linear process. It's not a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Value streams tend not to be a step-by-step process. This is everything that's included within that value stream. This is what you should be looking at. It also has a lot more what's in Lean Six Sigma, what's called the tact time or the drum beat, the 1, 2, 3, the lead times, the how much each step takes for at each point, which differs from a process map. If anybody is familiar with process mapping, this is critical when you're looking at supply chain management in a crisis mode, because you want to look at how can you look at the value add versus wasteful steps in your process, specifically in a crisis mode? Because things that, okay, well, if it takes an extra week, that's fine. You're trying to find what can you do to reduce that logistical footprint. You want to look at, especially if you're looking at trade routes where things coming out of China or things coming out of Taiwan, or you're looking at different areas of the world that are hot spots for the buyers. There are a lot of hot spots around the U.S. that are equally as contaminated as China, right? So you want to look at where those spots are in your value stream and identify, is there another workaround? Is that value add? Is that critical? It might be, or you might be able to reduce that down. So again, go through, take an hour or so to start documenting what is included in your entire value stream for your supply chain network. Again, contact suppliers. I keep saying everything's essential. It's because these 5 things are critical. Out of everything that you should be doing as a supply chain manager during a time of crisis, these are the five areas that will help you get ahead of this curve. As a supply chain manager, look at your holding costs. Remember, the holding costs are the costs associated with storing inventory that remain unsold. Okay. Again, we do panic buying. We tend to even though we're not technically hoarding this stuff, we tend to buy a larger amount of inventory than what our normal rate of turn is. This tends to, because we think we're going to need it and we don't know if we're going to get more. But yet, a lot of the time, we don't know if that inventory is going to be sold, or we're going to be needing it, or we're going to use it. So contact the suppliers. Can they hold it? If you don't need to carry the risk of inventory, don't carry the risk. Maybe you can just reserve that stock, purchase it on demand, right? Restock fees. If you can't carry that risk, maybe you can negotiate at the start. Okay, if we do need to return this inventory, what will that be? I will say that I've talked to a couple of suppliers over the past few months, and every month that the crisis goes on, their restock fees are going up. If we talked to them back in January, it was 15%. And the same supplier, it is now at 50% restock fee. Communication. I'm a big fan of communication, and more communication. Most supply chain managers have that, those 1 or 2 people at the supplier that can just get things done, right? You have that one person that is your go-to person. You have that point of contact. Okay, I'm going to call up Bob or Jill, and you know what? If I make that call and I say, hey Sally, I need 30 widgets here by Thursday. Bam, they're going to get it to me by Thursday. But just as you had to prioritize what you're doing with your customers, the suppliers are doing it with theirs. Johnson & Johnson said back in January that they would no longer be that you had to give a written justification on where the location of the mask would be, or where the end user will be for N95 masks because they will not be shipping N95 masks outside of the US. They were prioritizing in January where their product will be used. They elevated to the executive level at Johnson & Johnson where their product will be used. So that point of contact no longer had the ability to get things done. So you might want to reach out to your supplier and then find out now who is the quote unquote new decision maker, who is the new executive, who is the new person that's going to get things done. For them, on their end, it's helpful to reach out and establish that line of communication because, as I like to call, the Three Stooges effect. Because if you have, there's a lot of companies that have multiple departments contacting the same supplier. When you have a decentralized ordering system, there's a lot of companies that don't have a single supply chain management office, and you have multiple offices contacting the same supplier, all trying to get the same resources. Then what happens when 5 departments are trying to go through the same door? It's the Three Stooges effect. So having one point of contact for one supplier can be very helpful for that supplier. I wish I was exaggerating. I was working at a organization and I tried, because it was a decentralized organization, I contacted a supplier and I was told that I could not get a product because that product was on reserve for another person at my organization. It happens. Relationship management is critical here, because just as you are receiving crazy demands, your supplier is receiving crazy demands. Work with them as much as possible, and I guarantee you, they will make it a priority to get what they can to you, just as you would make it a priority to get what you can to your customers if they keep you updated. Hey, this is what's going on. I'm trying to work with you. This is what's going on. Again, same thing here. There's something called supplier Kaizen, if anybody's familiar with Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is huge in the world of supply chain. It's instead of the traditional supply chain where you're just kind of going, step by step down and then step by step back, where the information flow is going in a very linear process. If you contact the suppliers and you are opening up the lines of communication, then you could just have a centralized communication plan going. Then as the demand spikes, your communication flow will go. Identifying inventory costs and restock fees. Again, this is a big one. Shelf life. We tend not to think about this unless you're really in a perishable market, such as food. You tend not to think about this, but chemicals have a shelf life. The N95, R95, P100 masks have a shelf life. The N95 mask that is recommended to stop the spread of COVID-19 has a 5-year shelf life. The DoD has stock points around the country for reserve stock of N95 masks for cases just like this. There was a situation where this once this crisis happened, that they activated a certain location, but they didn't check their inventory in over 7 years and found that their entire stockpile of inventory was expired by 1.5 years of masks. And even though it's all sealed in the container, it's still expired, and they couldn't use the one thing that everybody's searching for. So it can be a simple thing. It takes a lot of legwork to actually go, but check the shelf life of your material. And a good rule of thumb, just make sure you have at least 6 months of shelf life, or make it a requirement to your suppliers that there's a 6-month shelf life remaining before they ship it out. Transportation. Remember this is often overlooked in normal supply chain operations. Review where the transfer of ownership occurs with your supplier. In a lot of cases, the transfer of ownership occurs at the dock, at the distribution center. So you own that material as soon as it gets off the loading bay and onto the dock. So it's before it's ever even in the same country as you. You now have responsibility and more importantly, liability for that material. So what happens if that material is coming from, has COVID-19 on that material and gets people sick in transit? You may be legally responsible for that outbreak. So I'm saying, make sure that you're reviewing with the supplier who has ownership in transit, but more importantly, who has legal responsibility in transit. Price increase. Okay, we don't like to talk about this. This is very unethical, but we should be pragmatic about this. In times of crisis, there are people out there that tend to raise the price. Why? Because they can. Because they see a raise in demand, so that then they reach out and say, no, well, you know what? It was $5, but now we're going to sell it at 10. And then there's all these excuses why, oh, no, it's harder to get, it's really limited, so on and so forth. And in my opinion, it's price gouging, but that's what people are saying. So just be aware that this stuff occurs, and you should be at least proactive for that. Just review that the sources are meeting the industry requirement or industry standards. It can be very helpful for that. Again, this is just review shelf life, review the transfer of ownership, review the price increase. Stock fees, again, contact the suppliers, understand what that restock fee may look like. Because if you're going to increase your inventory, and then after the crisis is over, you want to try to decrease it, you may be paying a premium to return it. Carrying cost, again, even if you already bought it and you're putting it in a warehouse, sitting in the warehouse is costing you money. The warehouse cost space, you're paying taxes on the inventory, the insurance on the stock, just paying your employees to manage it. Everything has a cost to that. Or make sure that you're aware of what that is costing you on a day-to-day, month-to-month, quarter-by-quarter time. And then what is also the opportunity cost by not having that cost, or not having inventory? That's the opposite of everything else that we're talking about. Because what is it costing you by not having the material needed to provide to your customers? This is, again, one of the reasons why number 5 on the list is contact your customers to identify that. Because at the end of the day, your reputation is far more valuable than the actual product itself. So how do you deal with this? A few different ways. Again, very simple risk management or risk assessment. Shelf life, review the shelf life dates on all items prior to purchase. You can reach out to your suppliers. I've done this tens of thousands of times where I put this in the contract with the suppliers. Have it where you require 6 to 12 months of shelf life remaining on all material before when it arrives to your facility. It could be and if it's not, then it's an automatic take back without a restocking fee. That can probably save you a lot of headaches. Transportation, again, just a simple review. This could be a 20-minute conversation with your suppliers. Review when the transfer of ownership occurs. And this can save you hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the size of your company, in legal liability. Price increase. Review the supplier sources. If you suspect price gouging, I would contact the police. Hands down. Restock fee. Talk to your suppliers. Talk to them about their return policy. I said it before. I said it multiple times. I will keep saying that. Just if you keep in constant contact with your suppliers, you'll be amazed at how much better off you will be. Carrying costs, develop an inventory management plan for the crisis, and develop a transition back to normal operations. When I was working at FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, we always say that demob starts at MOB, which is demobilization, as in you're tearing everything down, you're shutting down operations from an emergency incident, and that starts when you first get on scene. Understanding that this crisis is a crisis, but it's a momentary crisis in the grand scheme of things. What do you need to get back to normal operations? Because that's not a light switch. It's not going to be, we're in crisis mode now, we're back to normal operations. Developing, what does that look like between where we are now and where normal operations, where you think normal operations will be, and what does that difference look like? Developing a transition plan back will get you light years ahead of your competition. I guarantee you, having that transition plan in place will have you light years ahead of your competition. That shortage cost, work with your customers to understand their needs. You may even find an alternative that helps them in the short term. Again, going back to the masks example, people were looking for N95 masks, talking to them, well, we don't have N95. Well, we have the R95. It's a little bit more expensive, but the N95 mask has a 4-hour wearability life. The R95 has an 8-hour. Like I said, a few dollars more, but you get more out of it. So we are able to meet the customer's need, even though we're out of stock of one thing. It's, again, talk with them instead of saying, it's not just a flat out no. Finding a workable alternative might be able to be helpful. Which is why I say contact your customers, contact your suppliers. These situations can damage the trust relationships that you have with your customers. It really is about trust. Just like you wouldn't go to a retail store with a company that you didn't trust. If you didn't trust a car salesman that you think would be selling you a lemon, you want to go there. Why would any of your customers come to you if they didn't trust you? If you want to keep your customers after the crisis, reach out to them today if you haven't already. have ongoing relationships with them. Hey, what do you need? This is what we have. I got to say, I have been literally around the world about this. I haven't found anybody, any customers that doesn't appreciate the honesty of, this is what we have. We're going to try to do the best, because just like you're getting a lot of crazy, hectic demands in your organization, your suppliers are going through the same thing. So are your customers. Nobody is not feeling this crisis. So reach out and try to work with them together to go through this. Develop the plan, right? Provide consistent response to them. If you haven't restored that supply chain with them, do so as fast as possible. I will say, do not be defensive. This is, once you become defensive, that's where everybody's walls go up as fast as possible. If you start making rash decisions, those knee-jerk reactions, again, that's where a lot of this starts crumbling down, because people start making when people start making knee-jerk reactions, they're only thinking in the short term, not the strategic long term. Don't ignore the risk that you're incurring. Again, buy. Well, now you have only this inventory that you don't know how to get rid of. Work with your customers, because they are just as stressed as you are. So that is the 5 things that I have for you. Does anybody have any questions?
Kyle, I didn't see too many come through the chat other than people saying that they were being excused for lunch purposes and so forth. So yeah, we're going to open it up. If anybody either wants to show their screen, jump in, ask a question, feel free. We're going to open up this time. Okay, from Dana Laura. Oh, hi, Dana. Okay, so she asks, are you able to share any scenarios that were handled well during this time other than J&J?
Absolutely. So there was a few situations such as Pico. Pico has done a phenomenal job, specifically in their project management area, in how they are dealing with their suppliers. They are reaching out to their suppliers to just let them do ongoing conversations. While the supply chain, the physical supply chain, isn't moving as fast as, for a great example, their communication line has been phenomenal. Sorry if that's not the best example.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? There's Jessica.
Hi, Ed.
Hi,
Hi, Jessica.
Hope you guys are doing well.
Doing well.
So as you know, I work for government, local government, and I think, are there any strategies or any suggestions on talking about, I know this is supply chain management, but also like change management in general when people are getting back to work, when it comes to supplies and managing that work, and also addressing, the people aspect of this, because, I don't know when the city will be open, but, it's also preparing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very good question. So one of the biggest things that I would recommend is patience. We're social creatures. One of the biggest things that we do is we learn through social interactions. Well, we haven't done that in 6 weeks. We might be doing Zoom meetings. We might be doing Skype calls. We might be texting back and forth. We might be going through emails. but we're not recognizing body language. We're not recognizing facial cues. Have the patience when you get back to work, because people literally have not had practice interacting with people outside their homes in over a month. So those social interactions, where, for lack of a better term, we might be socially inept to how other people are reacting to the words that are coming out of our mouths. So that would be one huge thing that I would say to prepare for, is our initial conversations when we get back face to face is going to be very different. I imagine a lot of interpersonal conflict within the first week or two.
Okay, thanks,
Great
Jeff.
question.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, this is Mandy Felix.
Hi, Mandy.
How's everybody doing? I want to do a shout out to all my folks on the phone from Quest. Thank
Hi.
you for joining. And I'd like to respond to Dana's question, if I may, with another example. Kyle, do you mind?
Sure.
So I actually have two. So, plainly put, I think Amazon did a great job as far as kind of pushing off the immediate deliveries for non-critical items. So that's a way to balance the supply chain, right? So that they can make sure that people are getting food or PPE or cleaning products or things that are critical, and pushing off things like clothing or household items or so on. A specific example for the COVID situation, I think me and my team can speak to very clearly, because for those of you that don't know us, I'm a senior category manager for Quest Diagnostics. I have several team members on the phone from Quest Diagnostics, and as you all know, we are working very hard right now to bring up testing to support the COVID pandemic. And one of the things that has been just very enlightening for us to see is how quickly we and the FDA can move to approve these tests. So what normally takes many, many months to take an assay and turn it into a clinical test, we have literally been able to do in weeks, so that we could bring up the testing that you all may hear about in the news, which is the PCR test, which determines if you have COVID, and now the serology test, which determines if you have antibodies against the COVID.
Thank you, Mandy, and I appreciate that comment. I really do appreciate that. That is a great example of how it can work. I thought I saw in the chat there was another question about for career changing.
Well, sorry about that, Kyle. I wanted to keep on mute myself. Yes, Sean asked everybody, how about the workforce with people changing jobs or careers because of layoffs affecting more supply chain delays?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was even reading in an article about how the food supply chain is now being impacted because processing plants are shutting down due to quarantine. So now literally the food is there, but the farmers don't have anywhere to send it to because they're getting shut down. So one of the things that I have noticed is there's this huge shift to more technology, more remote opportunities, and especially in the realm of supply chain management, there's a lot of opportunity for supply chain managers in remote work. So doing inventory management, capacity planning, forecasting, there's a lot of opportunity there.
One of the things I know that you and I spoke about probably a couple weeks ago when we were talking about topics about this, and I know we joked about it half-heartedly, but you walk into stores now, grocery stores, and I don't ever remember seeing anything such as this unless it's going to snow and people are just running and going and grabbing their eggs, milk, and bread. And now we're faced with the supply chains even kind of dredging down to the grocery markets not having toilet paper and paper products and things like that. And I've even seen stories about farmers who are now, they're literally starting to take their crops and either give some of it away as much as they can in a timely manner, because, you know, if they're, whatever they're making and they're trying to get it out there, because all these restaurants that were in their supply chain, all these outlets that were selling food, they're no longer there. And that's really impacting farmers. I mean, this goes down to you know, all the way from the ground up. I mean, it's pretty impactful what's going on now. So I know that was one of the things that, you know, again, we joked about people not being able to get toilet paper and having to order it through Walmart online. And it just makes you think, how are the processing plants not able to churn out enough for demand? But we did have a question from Natalie. What is the best way to handle reintegrating the normal work at different stages than your customers? There are some companies and states that are going back to business next week, while some areas are just on hold until June. Great question.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, I go back to the communication lines, right? Contact your customers, contact your customers, contact your suppliers. If your company is not going back to work and you're still being remote, but your supplier is back at work, or, which is probably far more likely, your customer is going back to work and you're still at home, how do you manage that, right? Or far more likely, some people at your job or in your company is going back to work and some aren't, so on and so forth, some sort of hybrid. This is very common even before the crisis, right? That some people work remote, some people don't. And one of the things that I can recommend is, again, develop a transition plan. Get a meeting with key people, key stakeholders in that value stream, and identify what is the best strategy for your value stream. Develop that transition plan and go with that, because, and I'm sorry, I can't give I'm giving a very broad, it depends answer. I apologize for that, but because the issue is that it really is going to depend on a lot of if-then statements.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. We have another question from Shane. What's the current status of supply chain management classes that were set for this spring but had to be delayed? Well, Shane, we're actually looking forward to moving forward with that, but we're still trying to work out a timetable. We are definitely going to talk a little bit more about that, Kyle, Mandy, and myself, and we will definitely let you know. So I appreciate that coming in as a question as well, just to, you know, kind of highlight what we also do at Penn State, Great Valley, and the Navy Yard. So anybody else have any questions? I don't see anything else coming in through chat. Okay, Kyle, I'm going to leave it back to you. You know, do you want to have any closing?
I want to thank everybody for taking your time. I know this is, oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's really appreciate that.
That's from Dana. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah, this has been a great opportunity to share with everybody. I know that you know, even taking an hour out of the day, because one of the most difficult challenges during this crisis has actually been working from home. Everybody assumes nobody is working, so we're actually working more hours. We're actually working harder working from home because everybody's assuming nobody's working. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit and try to figure out how do we get ahead of the crisis instead of being reactive to the crisis.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I also want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to join us today. I know that, you know, we all have everything else going on. You know, many of us having small kids at home. I know that there were a couple people that weren't able to jump in today because they said that they're trying to manage their time between their work and their kids jumping on their laptops to do Zoom meetings with their own teachers, which is, you know, altogether makes for a lot of chaos in a household. So I can see where people are coming from. So, you know, if this is where we're going, I just want to, Deb, just say very insightful. Thank you. Thanks, Deborah. So what we'll do is we'll close it out here. Again, what we'll do is we will, since we recorded this, we're going to send this in a little thank you email to you. If you want to share it with anyone, feel free. If you have any questions, concerns, feel free to reach out as well. So without further ado, guys, we have another couple
Oh,
new.
we have one person who raised their hand real quick.
Oh, did they?
Yes. RJ?
Okay.
RJ? No? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see that. Sorry.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
guys. All right. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Good one.